Hi guys, welcome back. Today we're going to make these feathers in watercolor. For this you need some watercolor paper, some brushes and some watercolors. As always, the first step is going to be creating a basic pencil sketch. Next I'm going to start working on the leftmost feather, and here I'll take some clear water and apply it inside the feather. You would want to ensure that there is some water left standing on the paper, but not a lot. So I've left a very thin gap just where I want the stalk or the spine, whatever it is called, of the feather to be. And now we'll quickly mix our colors. Here I'm mixing some scarlet red with white. As you can see, the color is very thin, it has a lot of water in it. We want it to be this way so that the first layer is very soft and the color just blends in properly and does not have any hard edges. Next we load up our brush with this thin mix of color that we have and start applying it to the insides of a feather. You want to ensure that the paper is still pretty wet when you start applying this. You don't necessarily have to color the entire feather at this point in time. You can leave a few white spaces, go back in some places and add a little bit more color just to give sort of like a variation. You can also run your brush along the spine or the stalk that you've created, just so that you have a better demarcation of that. Here I've just added some more color and I'm adding some spots at the top. I just wanted to do that. It's completely up to you whether you want to do it or not. That's one thing I really like about this particular piece, is that there is no real right or wrong way to go about it. It's just whatever way you feel right, and whatever colors you like, you can just throw them on the paper and it'll still look pretty. So now we'll let this first feather dry a little, and we'll move on to the next one. Add some clear water here as well and start adding in some colors. I'll just speed this up a little for you guys. So we've applied the water, now we're adding some color. Here I'm using Veridian green mixed with some ultramarine blue, and later on I'm also going to add in some lemon yellow to the white areas. Now we're going to let the second feather dry and move back to the first one, add some more color to it, start putting in some lines, and again darken the dots that you'd made at the top. We're just trying to give it a little bit of depth and some feather-like texture at this point in time. We'll demarcate or try to emphasize the spine again here. Just going to add some light strokes of color at the bottom here to indicate those the very soft part of the feather that's not really a part of the feather but still is. And I'm going to mark in the stalk or the bottom part of the stalk or the spine with a darker color and try to go over the spine again here. Now let's go back and add similar details to our second feather. And now let's repeat the same process on our third feather. I'm adding the same mix of scarlet and white that we used on the first feather. However, I wanted to add another color here. So in the spaces that I'm leaving as white, I'll be adding some lavender color, which would be some ultramarine blue, scarlet and white mixed together. Just a very light hint of scarlet in there. So even though both these colors really go very well with each other, but I kind of wasn't sure before I started doing this. I just wanted to try it out, but I really loved the way it turned out in the end. So I'm going back and adding a little bit more of the pink and the lavender just to ensure that both of them do turn up as prominent in this particular feather. I've mixed some burnt sienna with my scarlet and white mixture, and I'm just adding that here to give a little bit of a darker detail. I somehow at this stage wanted there to be more detail on this particular feather, so I just went ahead with it. So somehow I went ahead and mixed some black in that mixture, like a very tiny bit, but of course black is such a dominant color, so it really made that spine stand out quite a lot, and I really didn't like the way it was turning out. So I couldn't record this bit, but because I did not like that spine standing out, I used that same mixture and added some more details on the other parts of the feather as well. So now we've moved back to the second feather and we're adding more details here with a darker color or with a less watery mixture with less, you can basically think of it as less water and a lot more pigment right now, so it's more saturated. And we're just adding those fine details here, like some lines for marking the texture of the feather. I'll be doing this a couple of times on the second and the third feather. If you do not want to go over it a couple of times and just want to finish it in one step, then I would suggest you use a really fine brush, or like make some fine and very saturated lines, but make sure that your brush is not too dry so that the strokes are not dry. That should have some water in it, bare minimum, not a lot of it, so that the color is actually kind of strong and not very diluted or faded out. So I'm just marking some dark lavender lines on the lavender part and some dark pink lines on the pink part, just so that it has a bit of both the colors in it. And on the mixed part, I think I'm going over with the lavender because I want it to be more on the lavenderish side. After this, we'll move on to some fun part wherein we cover the rest of the painting, just focus on the lavender part, load up our brushes with some water and some lavender mix, and really just splatter it on there. And we'll do the same for the first feather and then the second feather as well. I just love splattering paint onto the paper. Here, however, before doing that for the middle feather, I've gone and added some highlights with the white pen. You can splatter on the middle feather before adding the highlights as well. So this feather kind of looked really plain to me. I did not like the color scheme as much, so I decided to add some white spots in here, and once I started doing it, I just felt like covering the entire feather, so I just went ahead with it. As I said previously, there is no hard and fast rule to it. You can just do whatever you want. There is no right or wrong per se here. And here it is. We have our final painting of feathers in watercolor. Thanks a lot for watching this video. Hope that you really enjoyed it, and if you did, please like this video, share and subscribe to my channel. Also follow me on Facebook and Instagram, and hope to see you next time. Thank you. Bye bye.